goodness, not as many people around as last week. I can't understand it.
I knew so. Nobody yelling.
There's some loyal. We're just getting started.
You hang the chance. I can hardly wait.
Okay. We'll be moving forward and trying to wrap up some more nominations on the executive calendar, both for the administration and for the judiciary, before we begin to wrap up business here and head home for the election. Let me just say one more time, I'm extremely proud of our members for last week. We stood up for the fact that you're presumed innocent in this country, and we also stood up to the efforts to intimidate us all, which you all saw all over the Capitol and at our homes. And the one sort of happy conclusion you can draw after it, whatever deficit in enthusiasm Republican voters may have had going into the fall election has been eliminated. And I think we're likely to see, for an off-year election, record turnouts of both Democrats and Republicans going into the fall election.
We got a little preview of what life would be like here in the United States Capitol with Democrats in charge if they're successful in capturing one or both houses of the Congress after the midterm elections. Angry mobs, intimidation, showing up at people's homes, mailing them coat hangers, and trying to intimidate members. That's not exactly my ideal of how the United States Congress should operate. They also gave us a preview of how they would continue to deal with health care today by denying consumers choices. In this case, under the Congressional Review Act brought by Senator Baldwin, they wanted to strip away the option for consumers to buy short-term policies to fill the gap in their other coverage, and in the process, according to the Urban Institute, deny 1.7 million Americans the opportunity to buy coverage that they actually wanted and that they could afford. In my state, the 254 counties, 94 of those counties only have one option. And what these policies under this regulation would provide is an option for people to have a choice to find something that fills their need, again, at the price they could afford. But protecting patients against pre-existing conditions is something we all support. But basically, the misleading argument we're hearing from the other side is the only way you can do that is through the Affordable Care Act. We don't need more command and control, more paternalism out of a Washington that thinks it knows what's best for you. We need more choices for consumers so they can buy health care at a price they can afford and that suits their needs.
Well, Judge Kavanaugh is now Justice Kavanaugh, and as the leader in the whip pointed out, what you saw last weekend was the rule of the mob versus the rule of law. And here in the Senate, it was the rule of law that was that came out on top. We had a duly elected president who nominated a nominee to the Supreme Court, a duly elected Senate that performed its constitutional duty of advise and consent and confirmed Judge Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. It was a brutal nomination fight, and there's been some suggestion that maybe the Senate now is broken as a result of all that. But I would just point out that while all that was going on, we were continuing to process important legislation and get big partisan votes on bills that are important to the American people. We did a landmark opioids bill, big bipartisan bill. We did a 5-year reauthorization of the FAA that strengthens airport infrastructure and improves safety and service for the traveling public. We passed water infrastructure legislation in a big bipartisan way that is critical to our nation's infrastructure, and passed a number of appropriation bills, historic number of appropriation bills at this point in the process. In fact, more appropriation bills that we've seen at any time in the last 2 decades on their way or have passed and been signed into law by the President. So it's been a very productive time here, and we continue to do the important work of the American people, and the Republican Senate is committed as we move forward to continue to take on the challenges that face this country and move legislation that will put policies in place that are good for economic growth, good for jobs, and good for our country.
This morning, the Senate passed the American Water Infrastructure Act. It had already passed the House and will soon be on the way to the President's desk. Large bipartisan support. The bill passed the full Senate 99-1. President Trump, in his State of the Union, asked the Congress to present him with infrastructure legislation. We have now done that with regard to water infrastructure. This is a consequential, significant piece, the largest piece of infrastructure legislation going to the President. It has broad support across the country, groups including the American Petroleum Institute and the Sierra Club. This deals with clean drinking water, wastewater, also with our ports, with inland waterways, with dams, with irrigation systems, with reservoirs. This is a bill, bipartisan passed, that is going to be good for communities as well as the country, good for the economy as well as the environment.
Well, on that topic, you know, the economic numbers are as stronger than they've been in almost 50 years, going back to 1969, 3.7% unemployment, growth above 4%, numbers that don't occur. That can be even better. Things like the FAA bill, the structural things that make the economy work. I think particularly the water infrastructure bill, looking at the transportation network that we need to link together. The Mississippi River Valley, where I live, is the biggest piece of contiguous agricultural ground in the world. It has its own built-in transportation system. We need to make the most of that in an economy where world food demand is going to double between now and 2050. But looking at that, looking at returning manufacturing to the country again, as the President's working to do, and I think we're beginning to see happen. But the first two questions you'd ask if you're thinking about making something in America today would be, can you pay the utility bill and do what you want to do? And does the transportation system work for what you want to do? And if the answer to both those questions isn't yes, you never get to any other question. Things like our water infrastructure linking to rail and highways make a big difference. This Congress is doing that, and this economy is ready for that.
In the United States, we cherish our First Amendment rights. We cherish our right to petition. We cherish our right to assemble. We cherish our right to protest and free speech. But over the past several days, we've seen calls to kill the Supreme Court nominee. We've seen white powder sent to the Pentagon, to the President, to our colleagues. We've seen people say that Steve Scalise was complicit in his own attempted assassination. My wife received a text message of a graphic beheading. We now have people, public officials, saying you have a right and should be incivil to each other, uncivil, a call for incivility. You have others saying, Michelle Obama may have said, when they go low, we go high. But I'm saying when we go low, we kick back. When they go low, we kick back. This is not who we are as a country. We have our political disagreements, and we should cherish the rights to express our disagreements. But when it comes to calls for violence and attempted murder and assassinations, this country has gone too far, and it's time that we step back from that brink. My colleague Michael Bennet and I were sent here to work together. We have our disagreements, but we have always fought for the best of our state. And I hope that every colleague here will do the same. And I hope the American people can be proud of the fact that while we disagree, we will not let incivility prevail.
To Senator Gardner's point, and also what you had alluded to in the bipartisanship that Senator Thune talked about on some of these other bills here. Specifically, what have you done since the Kavanaugh vote? What will you be doing to try to lower the temperature? I know there's been success on some of these other major pieces of legislation, but because the fight over Kavanaugh was so bruising on both sides, what you, Senator Schumer, need to do to lower the temperature here so that everybody can get along?
Well, I think Republicans need to continue to act just like they did. I mean, look at the way Chairman Grassley dealt with the committee in an even-handed and calm way. You didn't hear Republicans on the Senate during the Kavanaugh debate talking like that. It's pretty clear what's contributing to this atmosphere that Senator Gardner was talking about. It's not coming from the Republican side of the aisle. When you have the last Democratic nominee for president saying incivility should continue until the Democrats win the House? For goodness sake, I think we know who the culprits are here when it comes to the quality of discourse in the country is, and it's not coming from the Republican side of the aisle.
Do you think a criminal justice reform bill is a move in the lame duck for election security, or what is on the agenda for the lame duck?
Well, criminal justice has been much discussed. As you know, we have a divided conference on that issue, but what we'll do after the election is take a whip count, and if there are more than 60 senators who want to go forward with that bill, we'll find time to address it.
Are you not in danger of conflating people who came to public buildings and public parks and public places all around here to express their First Amendment rights by sort of tarring everybody with the worst of this? I mean, where's the line between what's appropriate and what's not?
You work here, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're not exaggerating what happened. You saw it, all of you. You saw it. That's incivility on full display right here in the Capitol by people trying to intimidate us into giving up on the presumption of innocence. It didn't work. We have a new Supreme Court justice. Giving in to that kind of behavior or condoning it is not on our agenda. Thank you.
Senator McConnell.